Have you ever heard a strange knock on your wall when you know you're alone? Or seen something move out of the corner of your eye only to find nothing there? For most of us, it's just our imagination. But for one family in North London, it was the beginning of a 2-year nightmare that would become one of the most famous and chilling paranormal cases in history. So, hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Terror Unseen. This is the story of the Enfield Poltergeist. Our story begins in August 1977 in the quiet, ordinary town of Enfield at a council house on 284 Green Street. This was the home of Peggy Hodgson, a single mother, and her 4 children, Margaret, Janet, Johnny, and Billy. Life was normal, perhaps a bit tough, but completely unremarkable, until one night when Peggy was putting her 2 daughters, 11-year-old Janet and 13-year-old Margaret, to bed. The girls started complaining about their beds shaking. Peggy, like any parent, assumed they were just messing around and told them to settle down. But the complaints didn't stop. A few moments later, she heard a loud shuffling sound from their room. She went back in and saw a heavy chest of drawers sliding across the floor, seemingly on its own. She tried to push it back, but an unseen force resisted her. It was impossibly heavy. Terrified, Peggy gathered her children and fled to a neighbor's house, convinced someone was in her home. The neighbors, Vic and Peggy Nottingham, went over to investigate. At first, they saw nothing, but then, as they stood in the living room, they heard it, a slow, rhythmic knocking coming from inside the walls. It was a sound that seemed to have no source, no logical explanation. That night, they called the police. A lone police constable, Carolyn Heaps, was the one to answer the call. She entered the home skeptical, expecting to find a rational explanation. Instead, she became one of the first official witnesses to the strange phenomena. While she was there, a chair in the living room lifted off the floor, moved about 4 feet, and settled back down. She checked for wires, strings, anything that could explain it, but found nothing. In her official police report, she stated she saw the chair move and could not find a cause. This was no longer just a family's fear. It was a documented event. The story soon hit the newspapers, attracting the attention of the Society for Psychical Research, a British organization dedicated to investigating paranormal claims. 2 of its members, Maurice Grosse and Guy Lyon Playfair, became the lead investigators on the case. They spent months, almost living in the Hodgson house, documenting everything. And what they documented was truly extraordinary. The activity escalated far beyond knocking sounds and moving furniture. Toys, particularly Lego bricks and marbles, would fly across rooms with incredible force, seeming to come from nowhere. Loud guttural dog barks would echo through the house, even though there was no dog. Fires would spontaneously start and then extinguish themselves. But the most terrifying and perplexing phenomena centered around 11-year-old Janet. It seemed the entity, whatever it was, had chosen her as its focus. Janet would be thrown from her bed by an invisible force. She would levitate, hovering in midair, sometimes horizontally, as if being held up by nothing. Photographs of these levitations exist, and while some have tried to dismiss them as her simply jumping, the eyewitness accounts from Grosse, Playfair, and even journalists present a much more disturbing picture. They described her being lifted gently and then dropped or violently flung across the room. And then came the voice. A deep, raspy, otherworldly voice started speaking, seemingly from Janet herself. But it wasn't her voice. It was the voice of an old man. Through these chilling vocalizations, the entity identified itself. It claimed to be Bill Wilkins, a man who had lived and died in that very house years before. The voice would engage in conversations, often crude and aggressive, with the investigators. "Just before I died," the voice rasped through Janet, "I went blind, and then I had a hemorrhage, and I fell asleep, and I died in the chair in the corner downstairs." Researchers later confirmed that a man named Bill Wilkins had indeed lived and died in the house, in a manner consistent with the voice's claims. Tape recordings of these conversations are still available today, and they are incredibly unsettling to listen to. You can hear the struggle in Janet's own voice, and then this completely different, gravelly persona taking over. As the case gained international fame, it attracted the attention of Ed and Lorraine Warren, the American paranormal investigators you might know from the Conjuring films. They visited the house and declared it a genuine case of demonic possession, believing the poltergeist was an inhuman spirit merely pretending to be Bill Wilkins to gain the family's trust. Their involvement brought a new level of sensationalism to the case, cementing its place in paranormal lore. Of course, with such incredible claims comes intense scrutiny. Skeptics have long argued that the entire event was an elaborate hoax orchestrated by the children, particularly Janet. They point to instances where Janet was caught faking phenomena. In one famous incident, a hidden video camera captured her bending spoons and trying to hide it. Janet herself even admitted that they faked some things, maybe 2% of the events, just to see if the investigators would notice when things went quiet. She said they did it because they were under so much pressure to perform, to have something happen for the ever-present reporters and investigators. But does that invalidate everything else? What about the police officer's testimony? What about the dozens of independent witnesses, including journalists from the BBC and national newspapers who saw things they couldn't explain? They witnessed objects flying when the children were in plain sight with their hands visible. Maurice Grosse and Guy Playfair, despite catching the children in a few tricks, remained convinced for the rest of their lives that the vast majority of the phenomena were absolutely genuine. They argued that even if the children faked some things for attention, it doesn't explain the chest of drawers that moved on its own before anyone was even investigating, or the chair that levitated for a police officer. The Enfield Poltergeist is so chilling because it refuses to be neatly categorized. It's messy. It's a mix of documented, inexplicable events witnessed by credible people and the undeniable fact that the children at the center of it were not always reliable. Could two young girls, desperate for attention in a stressful home environment, have fooled everyone? Police, seasoned investigators, and hardened journalists for 2 years straight? Could they have produced the disembodied male voice that was analyzed and found not to be coming from Janet's vocal cords in a normal way? Or was this family truly terrorized by a restless spirit, an entity that attached itself to a vulnerable child? The activity eventually faded away, almost as suddenly as it began, around 1979. The family continued to live in the house for some time after. The experience left a permanent mark on all of them, especially Janet, who faced ridicule at school and carried the weight of the world's skepticism and belief for her entire life. The Enfield case remains one of the most compelling and heavily documented poltergeist accounts in modern history. It forces us to question the boundaries of what we think is possible. Was it a prank that got out of hand? Or was it proof that sometimes the things that go bump in the night are very, very real? The ambiguity is what makes it so terrifying. It's a story that stays with you long after you've turned the lights off. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the Enfield Poltergeist. What do you think happened in that little house in North London? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoy exploring the strange and unexplained, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. We'll see you in the next one.